What's up, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Well Man's podcast. My name is Brozy. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Keoni Tita. Keoni, how are you today?
Doing wonderful. I'm really excited about today's podcast, really the series that we've had. This is part 4 of our series, but we've actually have so far on our podcast list 6 sleep episodes, right? I think we had, I think if you go back to like episode 9, 101, I'm not sure what the numbers are, but you can Google them. And then 142 all the way up through to this one, which would be 145. If I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Brian? It's about
I think
right.
So. Yeah, it's definitely about right.
So this next one will be out in a couple of weeks then, I guess, this one that we're doing today. So
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so today I just want to wrap up. Hopefully we can wrap up our series, part 4 of sleep. We've basically been following a book, Why We Sleep, just came out. It's by Matthew Walker, PhD. So check out the book. It's a really good book. We've went through it in detail from start to finish, and hopefully we'll finish it up today. But today, what Brian and I want to talk about are basically sleep disorders, sleep medications, and then we want to wrap everything up for natural ways to help yourself, which is really the best way to help yourself with sleep. There are things that we have left out, which we'll get on further episodes, like one of our episodes coming up. I'm not sure when it's going to be, but we're just going to go over sleep medications, and that's it, from natural to prescription to over the counter. So we're not really hitting on that too much today, but we will hit on prescription meds a little bit today.
Awesome.
So, what are the main sleep disorders out there that people deal with? And there's one outlier that's basically a fatal sleep disorder. So let's go over them. The first one I want to talk about is somnambulation, right? Which is basically sleep disorders that involve any form of movement. So you can think about this as, sleepwalking, sleep eating, sleep talking, any type of movement that's going on there. And most people during these the events are not dreaming, even though you would think they are dreaming, because as you know, when you're in REM sleep, you're pretty much paralyzed, right? So You're not really dreaming. You're just kind of wearing nowhere man's land, so to speak, with between deep and light, maybe really in some really deep recesses of deep sleep, but they are actually not in REM sleep. So when you wake them and you talk to them about this, they're just like, ask them if they remember anything. They don't remember anything, even though they look like they're awake. If you had a camera on them, you would be like, man, these people are up, walking around, living life. But if you actually looked at their brain, they are asleep.
That's crazy. So eyes open, kind of interacting normally.
You could even somewhat interact with them normally. Yeah. Sometimes,
Gotcha.
And we may have all been through this. I remember growing up with my younger brother, we shared a room. Jade was notorious for this. He'd just get up and walk around. He'd start talking to people. It was just kind of crazy. And a lot of people just outgrow this, but it can happen at any stage at life. And it really becomes a problem when it becomes dangerous, right?
Yeah.
Like, for example, going off and walking along the highway, walking out your door, something like that. But most people don't get there.
Right.
So.
Do you have any funny story of Jade?
Yeah, I do have a funny story about Jade. I remember when we were young, he got punished or something. My parents made him clean out this drawer that was like full of cards, like playing cards, right? And he had to sort them all and get them organized. Anyway, that night he had a nightmare about cards attacking him. The Queen of Spades coming after him, the 10 of Hearts coming after him, whatever. Anyway, he ran, got out of bed and ran right into the door.
Oh, wow. That explains a lot. Maybe some brain damage.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm always wondering about that. But yeah, there's some crazy stories that I have in my family, especially with him and his sleepwalking when he was younger. And
that's interesting.
Yeah.
I've definitely heard of it, but I've never heard it called somnambulism. Say it again, Keoni.
Somnambulism, right? It's just basically being asleep and having some form of movement.
Okay.
there have actually been court cases around this where people have had this. I mean, there's been some tragic court cases where somebody has actually gone and killed somebody sound asleep,
Wow.
and yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy.
Gotta have a good lawyer to get that one.
Yeah, and what's really scary is that some of this stuff may be due to some meds that can make this make you more prone to this, some like sleep meds or different medications.
Right, I've certainly heard of that.
Yeah, so this is, I think it's rare. We probably have experienced people doing this. We probably have done this at some point in our lives. But the main one I want to talk about, we'll get to, is insomnia, because lots of people think they're insomniacs. And one thing I just want to make clear is being sleep deprived and insomnia are two different things. And most people that think they have insomnia are really just sleep deprived. And guess what, Brian? Most of that sleep deprivation is self-imposed, and they don't even realize it, right? So we're going to go over some things at the end here that even talk about that, but how you can like get rid of your self-imposed sleep deprivation. But nevertheless, let's talk about insomnia. Anyway, let me just step back. Sleep deprivation, as the name implies, is just really, you give yourself the inadequate opportunity to sleep. So you can think about it as that. And then insomnia is actually the opposite, right? It's the inadequate ability to generate sleep while allowing yourself the opportunity to do so. So you're doing everything right? You're trying to get to sleep. You're trying to get your shades, blackout shades, room cool, everything, and you still cannot sleep,
The worst.
Oh yeah. And just to be clear, most people can relate to this, but it's absolutely normal to have episodes of this periodically. All right. So we'll talk about how to diagnose this, but for most people, it's normal not to have a few nights of sleep where you just can't sleep. There is something called paradoxical insomnia. It's basically, when you look at the brain waves, they're actually the sleep recordings. People are sleeping fine, but they wake up and they're like, no, I didn't sleep at all, but they actually slept fine.
Yeah.
Or at least according to their brain patterns. Right.
Right.
So it wasn't as bad as they perceive it to be, basically. So,
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So different types of insomnia. We're talking about sleep onset insomnia. With my patients, I'm always asking them, like, when do you have difficulty falling asleep? What time you go into bed? Do you have difficulty maintaining sleep, or do you have both? So it's basically three types of insomnia. One of those three are combination of the two: sleep onset problems or sleep maintenance problems.
So how do we specifically, diagnose it?
So to diagnose it, basically, one, as a patient, you report dissatisfaction with sleep quantity or quality, right? Okay. And I think a lot of people do that, including myself, a lot of the times.
Yeah.
Suffering significant distress or daytime impairment, where you're just chronically tired, or you're just, on edge. You're sleep deprived. You're stressed out about it. You just can't fall asleep. But I think the main thing is having insomnia for at least 3 nights each week for more than 3 months. If you have that, then you are probably an insomniac, or it can be diagnosed as such.
So we're talking long term.
Right.
Versus a week or so.
Yeah. And the other thing that you also want to rule out for a complete diagnosis is, are there any coexistent medical disorders or medical conditions that, could otherwise be causing what appears to be insomnia? So it's those 4 bullet points. You just, as a physician, as a healthcare provider, you just want to go over that. And most of my patients, when you go through this, I'm like, basically, yeah, you're having trouble sleeping. I wouldn't diagnose it as insomnia. That, there's a lot we can do before we even go there. And there's a lot you can do to help yourself with sleep. But most people are not having insomnia. They're basically, just sleep deprived.
Right.
So it's completely normal, as we said, because I think with these sleep podcasts, me and you were laughing about on a couple episodes about, man, we're going to do all these sleep podcasts and just stress the hell out of people where they can't sleep at all.
Yeah.
And that's one of the main reasons why people have sleep deprivation, right? They're basically, their mind is racing. They have work stress. They may have relationship stress. They may be dieting. Dieting's a big cause of not being able to sleep.
Yeah, we've talked about it before, Keoni, where occasionally I'll make that like tea cocktail, some sort of sleepy time tea.
Yeah.
And some apple cider vinegar. And then I add a little bit of honey to it. And you were mentioning that the glucose is actually helpful to kind of maintain sleep. And that kind of correlates to the dieting.
It can be, but then again, there's also some research that shows high carbohydrate meals when compared to other meals, right? And we're talking meals, so it's not like having a little glucose, right, or a little honey, but we're talking meals. High carbohydrate meals seem to cause a little bit of problem for sleep as opposed to more well-balanced meals.
So just looking to be decently well-fed.
Yeah, decently well-fed, and certainly not overfed, because one big cause of insomnia is indigestion. Like if you go into bed where you ate too much, you're probably going to be waking up. Another big cause is drinking too much before you go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
So with all that being said, most people are sleep deprived, but unfortunately insomnia is still very common, right? We're talking about approximately 40 million Americans, or 1 out of 9 people. And that's a lot of people.
And that's the diagnosis of insomnia. That's what we broke down.
That's insomnia. Yeah. We're talking about 40 million Americans, 1 out of 9 people. So, and the other thing, we're not really sure why, but it's almost twice as common in women as in men.
Interesting.
That's great. And then also it's very common in people of color. They suffer at much higher rates also. And that has important implications for being and the well-recognized health disparities such as diabetes, obesity, cancer, cardiovascular disease, all of which are made worse by lack of sleep, and all of which have higher rates in people of color, right? So they all have a little bit higher rates of this type of thing. And it's like a vicious cycle. Right. So that says a lot about health disparities and things that we can do. And again, like me and you, the reason why we're doing this, and for all of you out there, is Brian and I feel like this wholeheartedly. I mean, if you listen to these podcasts on sleep, we are going to do more for you than your physician ever possibly could dream of doing with his pills. I mean, honestly, we're going to do more for your health doing this. So I really want you guys to really take heed and listen to it. Get the book. Just get the book that we've been following along.
Yeah, absolutely. And if not, it'll put you to sleep. It'll be double the strength of an Ambien.
Yeah, that's right. Listen to our podcast. If you find them boring, good. It will help you sleep.
Go back to episode 1.
Start from the beginning every night. Anyway, so that's interesting. So we know that sleep medications and over-the-counter sleep remedies with that many Americans, I mean, we're talking about billions of dollars in sales per year in the U.S. alone. I mean, and so people are really desperate with their sleep needs, and as they should be, because sleep is the most important thing you can do for your health.
Yeah.
A lot of people say genetics is a big deal, but most of the time it's not. It does play a role. It's definitely not even close to the full answer to insomnia, though. All right. There are numerous other triggers: psychological, physical, medical, environmental factors. Aging is a trigger, right? I mean, we talked about on previous episodes that, people that are older need to get as much sleep as people that are younger. But aging is a trigger because one thing that can happen is maybe they're on a lot of meds. Maybe their bladder is not as strong, right? They can't retain fluid, or they drink too much, or whatever it may be, or wake up too much, or they just play by the myth that's out there that they don't need as much sleep, which is absolutely not true.
Right.
So there's a lot of external factors that play a role. Too much bright light. These are all going to be on our PDF that we'll have if people email us and tell if they listen to the 4 episodes that we have here. But too much bright light, wrong ambient temperature, having your room too hot, caffeine we talked about. Big thing, doesn't allow you to go into appropriate REM sleep, decreases sleep pressure. Tobacco does the same thing. Alcohol is notorious for this. You cannot get appropriate deep sleep or REM sleep by having alcohol. And we're not talking about alcoholics here. We're talking about just a drink a night can mess with your sleep.
So I've heard a drink, like a drink helps, and then too much doesn't help. So we're saying that's not correct.
Yeah, so let's just clarify that.
Yeah.
A drink, alcohol is a sedative, okay?
Right.
So it can put you to sleep, but guess what? Once you're asleep, you usually wake up after a couple hours. And if you don't, what they find was sleep, looking at the sleep brain waves, if you don't go into appropriate deep sleep or REM sleep with that alcohol.
Yeah.
So, and there's tremendous implications with that, because if you don't go into REM sleep, we know that depresses your immune system, which we're going to talk about in just a minute when we talk about the meds. There's internal factors to sleep too. So things that come within you. So diseases like Parkinson's disease definitely causes problems with sleep. We already talked about meds. Think about asthma meds, right? These are more like stimulants. Steroids maybe thyroid meds will specifically. I'm thinking they're more like if you're hyperthyroid or anything that puts you into that state.
Right.
But the two most common triggers for insomnia are really just psychological, right? They're emotional concerns and worry, emotional distress or anxiety. So information overload all day. We're doing stuff, and we're in sympathetic mode during the day, and it's almost like we go towards the end of the night. We don't give our body to kind of wind down, even though people say they're winding down. Sorry, folks, winding down in front of the TV or watching the news that's not winding down. That's just adding to your sympathetic system, right? So winding down, and we're talking about going outside, sitting, watching the sun come down, reading by dim light, dimming the lights in your house, having nice conversation, lowering the noise level. All those things help wind down, give the body cues to get ready for sleep. So the biggest thing is an overactive sympathetic nervous system, which you cannot turn off, and the ways that people think they turn it off actually don't, right?
Right.
So think about the political discourse on the news, right?
Yeah, 100%.
What that does. Yeah, what that does.
It's something you've done well, Keoni, when I've stayed at your house a few times, just the kind of the dimming of the lights and the setting of the stage for sleep.
Yeah, it's setting the stage plays a big role. And one of the things I do is I walk every night, right? I have a walking group that I do. We do it at 7 p.m. most nights. And it's really great to walk as you see the sun coming down. It can help with your sleep. You don't want to do too vigorous of exercise, but just getting out there in the ambient temperature and light really helps.
I'm going to throw in stretching your hip flexors. I try and do that before bed every night. And you just get this relaxing feeling in your belly and overall in your hips, which all day you've been in hip flexion.
I think that would be incredible, because as long as you're not doing like really hardcore intense exercise, and we'll talk about why that will inhibit sleep in just a minute. We talked about on other podcasts. But again, think about stimulating your sympathetic nervous system, whereas hardcore exercise or intense exercise will do that, whereas stretching and walking, it's kind of like toning it down a little bit.
Yeah.
But so think about what an overactive sympathetic nervous system does day in, day out, living in the Western lifestyle. You're trying to go to sleep. You have to get up early, start your day all over. You're constantly being stressed out. Sympathetic nervous system raises your core body temperature. Core body temperature needs to drop a couple degrees to initiate sleep. We talked about that. You can't do it if your core temperature is raised up. That's why exercise, part of the reason why I will inhibit it. Higher levels of cortisol and stress hormone raise the heart rate, right? So they don't let your cardiovascular system slow down, which also raises core temperature. Therefore, you can't sleep because you're too hot internally and externally. Sympathetic nervous system also increases the chance that brain waves will alter, right? So the emotional regions, like in the amygdala, memory centers, hippocampus, all remain active compared to good sleepers, because they're at heightened, they're at heightened alert, so to speak, because of sympathetic system. And plenty of podcasts we talked about, like in the Western lifestyle, we are sympathetic overload and parasympathetic undertone. So we need to tone our parasympathetic system, right? So we're too much yang, not enough yin from a Chinese perspective.
Mm.
So basically, these people just can't disengage from life. Their mind races, they're stressed out, that type of thing. And because of that, they have poor deep sleep, NREM sleep, poor REM sleep, dream sleep, and more fragmented sleep. They sleep, they wake up, sleep, wake up, and they're just not going through complete cycles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the cures is really just having a routine, setting the stage, like we mentioned.
I think that's absolutely key. Like having a routine, going to bed around the same time every night. That alone can help people tremendously. So, because a lot of people are like, oh, well, I go to bed at 8. Next time they stay up watching TV or whatever they're doing, watching the computer screen, which makes things worse. But they're up at try to go to bed 11, and they switch it all around. So they have like this 4 to 5 hour time, and then where they either go to sleep in there, and then on weekends it's even worse. They may stay up till 1 or 2, and that just creates a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
One very important thing I want to say here. It is very important. You will get more help with your sleep going to somebody who is medically trained in sleep, like a sleep medicine doctor. And I want to throw a bone in here for medically trained naturopathic physicians, because they are not going to jump right to sleep meds. They're going to go through all the lifestyle stuff, all the sleep hygiene stuff first. All right. So, and I'm going to put that's where you want to go first before you go to your general practitioner, because your general practitioner, your conventional guy, is probably going to give you a sleep med right away and will create more harm than is necessary the longer you're on those, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Yep, 100%.
So next thing, so we talked about insomnia. That's what most people are dealing with. But let's talk about narcolepsy. It's interesting, man. This is awful that people have to go through their life. I mean, and this is on a whole spectrum of things. But imagine any significant action in your life that is governed by 2 simple rules, right? This is for all life forms. Staying away from something that feels bad or trying to accomplish something that feels good, right? Basically, that's how most animals interact, right, in life. Like you want to avoid things that are bad and you want to go towards things that are good. It's basically, the yin and yang of positive and negative emotions. That's basically life, right? Dictates all animal behavior. The life of a narcoleptic person is one in which you are forced to adopt a sterile existence of no highs or lows, because if you don't, you are likely to fall asleep and go catatonic, cataplexic at a drop of a hat. So imagine this: you're sitting, enjoying food, like really getting pleasure out of your food, and you just fall asleep at a drop of a hat because of the pleasure of food. Imagine going through watching a movie or watching your child.
It's gonna be bad for your sex life.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Sex. That's a great example. Sex, right? Getting pleasure out of that, fall completely asleep during that. So there's you live in this gray area, and
Right.
not only while you're living in this gray area is you're chronically tired. You're chronically tired, but you can't get good sleep at night, and then during the waking time, you're chronically tired and can fall asleep at the drop of a hat. All right. So it's considered a neurological disorder. It usually emerges around the ages of 10 and 20. There is a genetic component, mutation, but it's not an inherited disease. So it just doesn't explain everything that has to do with this disorder. There's a lot we don't know. Right. And 1 in 2,000 people tend to suffer from some form of it, which is pretty common. I mean, it's like as common as MS. But the 3 core symptoms of this are excessive daytime sleepiness, so attacks of overwhelming, irresistible urges to sleep. More so than me and you probably imagine, Brian. Like think about being in class. Let's think about you have a 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock college class. I've done this a lot. You just come back from eating, I don't know, a pizza for lunch, and now you're getting your glucose is all over the place, and you just can't keep your eyes like awake or open, Yeah. This is like 10 times worse these people experience.
Right.
It's pretty bad. And it happens at times, especially when you want to be awake, like driving, working, eating a meal, having sex. The other thing that goes along with it is sleep paralysis. This is the frightening loss of ability to talk, move when waking up from sleep. So you're basically locked in your body without control. And this is something that is very frequent in people that aren't narcoleptics.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say very frequent, but people have experienced at some point in their life, I think, right?
Yeah.
We call it sleep paralysis. It's funny because a lot of the alien abduction things that people think they've gone through is usually due to sleep paralysis. Because think about being locked in your body. You are kind of, conscious a little bit, but you can't move, and you're
Mm-hmm.
just getting out of dream sleep. So think about what dreaming is doing to that.
Right.
And then worst of all is cataplexy. And this is the sudden loss of muscle control, partial or full. These attacks are not random, but are triggered by moderate or strong emotions. So like you're talking about, sex, tear-jerking movie, or watching something that's tear-jerker, and you will just automatically go to sleep. An observer will think that you are completely passed out or asleep, but basically you're not actually sleeping. You're conscious of everything around you, but people can't wake you up. You're completely...
So you're completely aware.
You're aware. Yep. And it can happen at any time. I mean, it sounds like it's just a nightmare disorder to deal with, especially if you have it bad. So it's like, consider if you're being tickled, you go cataplectic. If you pleasurable events, you go cataplectic. Basically their lives can be emotional wastelands. And that sounds like hell for people. And the problem with it is there's not a lot we can do about it. There's not drugs out there that can really, really help. I mean, the drugs that help don't really get to the bottom of the issue. We're talking about amphetamines, stimulants.
Right.
One common drug is called Provigil. And then, of course, let's throw an antidepressant on top of that. But that's kind of the treatment. But it is interesting how this happens because the mechanism is fascinating. There's basically a sleep-wake switch in the hypothalamus, and it has direct communication to regions of the brain that kind of basically turn on and off the brain or get it ready for sleep. And it's basically due through a chemical called orexin. And this basically triggers that switch. And like a light switch, right, it's either on or off. So either you're asleep or you're awake. These people are kind of in between. So you can see why they just misappropriate, their sleep at just weird different times, and then they can't sleep at night.
Yeah. I know we're going to touch on it later, but is orexin something that some of these common drugs utilize, or no?
I'm not sure about that. We're going to go over that on another sleep episode, but I think they are looking at that to do that. But a lot of them, I'm not sure if that's the mechanism of Provigil at all.
Okay.
I don't know.
I've heard of Provigil.
Yeah. I don't know what the mechanism of that is. I mean, somebody who takes that definitely would know. It probably does mess around with that, but you are exactly right in your thinking. I mean, this is a mechanism that can help.
Yeah.
Basically when the body releases orexin, or the hypothalamus releases it, it triggers the switch to stay on, which is be awake, right? And then the thalamus opens up the sensory floodgates to wakefulness and turns on the brain from being sleep unconscious to completely conscious. At night, the opposite happens. The hypothalamus stops releasing orexin so that now you can sleep. With narcoleptics, it's a wishy-washy state. It's more of a binary state instead of off and on. Hence, you get these strange symptoms. And what's really fascinating about it is post-mortem examinations of narcoleptics in their brains show about 90% loss of the cells that produce orexin and the receptors. They're also deficient in orexin receptors. So not only do they not produce a lot of orexin, but they also don't have the receptors so that the body can hear the message that orexin has. So without the strong push of orexin, the sleep-wake cycle is just screwy. It's the faulty on-off switch. It's one of those things where it's relatively rare, and unfortunately for narcoleptics, there's not a whole lot of research going into like you maybe using orexin as a drug. I think Provigil is just if I'm not mistaken, it's more of a cleaner drug than amphetamines, but it may have something to do with orexin.
Have you ever treated a narcoleptic, Keoni?
I've had some, but not severe narcoleptics. but most narcoleptics should not be driving, because you never know
Right.
when it will hit. They definitely need to stay off the road or talk to their doc when they can.
Yeah, this is definitely something that's really going to impact your life,
Oh
as
yeah,
we obviously
yeah, yeah,
demonstrated.
yeah. Yeah, and unfortunately, the treatments are really lacking for this.
Right.
So, one very, very uncommon sleep issue is fatal familial insomnia. And this one, as the name implies, kills you, and there is no treatment for it. And luckily, it is very, very uncommon. But there have been cases that have just been tragic cases. One case is with a guy named Michael Cork, who in his 40s all of a sudden couldn't sleep. He was had a very active life, had children, everything else, and he thought that he just couldn't sleep, was having insomnia, went to go get help, and nobody knew what was going on, but he actually had this genetic disorder. And I think after a few months of this, it ended up killing him, because he could not absolutely sleep. And what happens when you can't sleep? Your body completely breaks down.
Right.
This disease is a genetic disease where it's actually a prion disease. Actually, prion is a abnormally shaped like protein that your body will make, but it's abnormally shaped, and basically it attacks the thalamus, and that's the sensory gate of that tells the brain to be awake or not be awake. So it completely messes that up. Post-mortem examination shows the thalamus of these individuals just peppered with holes throughout their thalamus because of this prion disease, and it will definitely kill you. So it's one of those diseases that has shown, without a doubt, that without sleep, yeah, it's a death sentence.
Yeah. It kind of speaks to that catabolic anabolic thing we keep mentioning throughout this sleep series as well.
Absolutely. But that's a genetic disease. But there are other examples of people dying due to sleep deprivation alone. So that's not, in which we not really classifying it as a disease. I mean, there's been a couple examples of people staying up for like 8, 9, 10 days in a row playing video games nonstop. I mean, there's like contests out there where people do this crazy stuff. And there's been cases where people have died from just staying up, being constantly stimulated and playing these games where it ends up killing them.
Yeah.
We also have a lot of research. There's another case of, I think there's a few cases in like Japan and definitely here in the U.S. Where people are just working too hard, staying up too late, not getting enough sleep, going into the office, not getting enough sleep. One particular case, this person from lack of sleep went into a seizure and ended up dying from that. But through animal studies, we know rats, where most of the animal studies are done, they'll die on average after 15 days of no sleep. They will die. And it's very interesting that this is about the same thing that happens with sleep deprivation in animals, right? After about 15 days, they die. So, it's really interesting. What's worse, lack of sleep or food deprivation? Well, based on what we've been going through and saying, I would say sleep deprivation is worse for your health. We humans can go months without food. We can only go like few weeks or maybe, a month or two without sleep before it causes significant health issues. Basically what happens to these animals, it's fascinating, is they cannot control their core body temperature. So what does the body do when you can't control the core body temperature? You basically become cold. So the body will eat itself up, basically, chew up your muscle to you become completely, what would you say? You just break down completely.
Right.
You're no longer anabolic, you're catabolic. And your body's just trying to create heat and it can't, so it eats your body up. These rats, sores start appearing on their bodies, and they can't. But they still couldn't. What's really fascinating is we see all this stuff happen, the body breaking down. But what is the main reason why these animals are dying? We see their immune system just completely break down. But one of the main issues, this is fascinating to me, that they actually end up dying is from septicemia. And guess what? It's septicemia from your own gut bacteria. So it's not a foreign, influence. It's
Right.
your gut bacteria that now have leaked into the blood that are going to kill you, according to these rat studies.
Oh. You
Yeah.
know who
So
David Blaine is, Keoni? The
yeah, is he a
magician. He
magician?
does,
Yeah.
yeah, he
Okay.
does like stunts and crazy stuff like that. He was
Yeah.
on that one podcast, Joe Rogan podcast. It's a little smaller than ours, and he was saying the one thing he would never, the like whatever you call it, skit or stunt, the stunt that he would never do again is he stayed awake for like 3 or 4 days in like an ice block.
Yeah.
And he said that one he would never do again because the irreparable damage of not sleeping. And then he was talking about kind of hallucinating after, and you
Yeah.
can see when he's being pulled out of the ice what he looks like and all that kind of stuff. And it's almost a case study of everything you just broke down there, that he had to
Yeah.
deal with like 40 plus days in the hospital
Yeah.
following that.
Well, talk about torture methods. The worst way you can
Yeah.
torture somebody is with sleep deprivation. That is absolutely the worst way. Based on what we know, you probably would want your fingernails pulled out from your fingers
Mm.
before you go sleep deprived. I mean, at least that's what some people have said that have undergone that kind of torture.
Yeah.
So it's pretty bad. Your whole body just breaks down. You basically create an internal hell in your body. So basically, we've answered this question a number of times on these podcasts, but the National Sleep Foundation, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, recommend between 7 and 9 hours of sleep. There was a study, pretty popular study that came out that said, well, modern day hunter-gatherers sleep about 6.7 hours, so we should base our sleep off of that. That's actually not true. They give themselves plenty of sleep opportunity to sleep. And there are a lot of flaws in that study. One of the things that we also think about modern day hunter gatherers, where they did these studies, are chronically calorie deprived. They're constantly searching for food, and if you're calorically deprived, you will tend to stay up more than you should. Also, they tended to, especially later on in life, on average, these people only live about 50 to 60 years of age.
Right.
And most of that is due to a weak immune system, which may play into a role if they truly do get 6.7 hours of sleep. That based on that number and looking at other studies, that would seem to indicate even a modern Western American who only gets that is probably only going to live between 50 to 70 years old based on that sleep. So, as far as anti-aging and longevity, you really want to do your best to get between 7 and 9 hours of sleep. Now, I think one thing that is very telling with that is there has been no study that has shown that too much sleep is bad. Okay, where there have been tons of studies that show lack of sleep is awful. Okay, and usually, it's like a U-shaped curve, like with most things. Like water is great for you unless you drink too much. Food is something you want to do for health unless you get too much. Exercise is great for you unless you do too much. It's probably the same thing with sleep, but we just haven't found any biochemical mechanisms that have been completely, became not functional or have become harmful from getting too much sleep. Haven't found it yet, so we don't know yet.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that's
So
a good thing.
we're not talking, your optimal, I guess, acting throughout the day. We're talking biological, cellular level there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So when somebody says, well, is too much sleep bad? Well, we don't know. We haven't found any studies that would indicate that it is at
Right.
this point, all right. So here, let's get to the main parts real quick that I think people really want to know. Okay, well, all right, great. Brian, Keoni, you've told us all about sleep. You frightened the shit out of us. So let's
Yeah. What do we
talk
do?
about. So what do we do? All right, let's go through it because we've been hitting on it quite a bit over these last 4 podcasts. So what is actually stopping us from sleeping? Well, lighting is a big, big deal. Regularized temperature, right? So keeping a temperature that is controlled in the house, that actually inhibits sleep. Caffeine is a big inhibitor, alcohol, and basically the legacy of punching cards. But let's just talk about lighting first, because I think that's the biggest issue. Basically, with the light bulb, Thomas Edison and other people that contributed to that basically extended our days, okay? And when you extend Yeah. So that's right. Basically, yeah. Extended our days, so we're up more. We no longer are guided by the natural turning of the earth to tell us
Right.
when nighttime is, where the sun comes up, goes down, that type of thing. So light bulbs play a big role. Um, and it affects the release of melatonin. Melatonin is that hormone released from your pineal gland that tells you when you should sleep. And it's not just dim light, because people go, well, what about dim light? Well, a hint of dim light. We're talking about 8 to 10 lux in studies can show that it will disrupt sleep. So the feeble, how do you say that, Brian?
Did you see
Feeblest?
me trip over the word at the beginning? I'm not even going to attempt feeblest.
Feeblest. Okay, the feeblest bed lamps out there only put out 20 to 80 lux. All right, and so we're talking about 8 to 10 lux disrupting sleep.
Mm.
All right, so that's a big deal. And then on top of that, most lights now are going to LED lights, right?
Yeah. Do you have any idea, Keoni, what like on that lux? I'm not sure if you did, but on that lux scale, what a candle would be?
I don't know. I think it'd be a little bit less, I would
It would
think.
definitely be less, but I'm interested to know if that would be, if that's kind of the ideal. Is that below the 8 to 10 or no? So I'll have to look
You
that
know
up.
what? I don't know, but according to the studies, even candlelight,
Mm.
if you extend the day in any way with light, can inhibit sleep. Although I don't think back in the 1600s or whatever, it was
Sure.
noticeable then, right?
Sure.
So, but yeah, any form of light, even light coming through your bedroom, a little bit of light may inhibit sleep. So that's why you really want to keep your room dark.
Yeah. It's crazy, Keoni. We have, and the way our apartment's set up, the stove and like oven blue light, if the
Yeah.
bedroom door is left even cracked, you can't sleep. And we're talking, it says
Yeah.
it's the digital time clock, and it'll disrupt
Well,
your
that's
sleep.
fascinating. Let's talk about blue light, right? Because
Yeah.
blue light is the worst. And LED lights, right? These energy saver light bulbs that are out now, a lot of them are LED, and they tend to be the worst. And one of the reasons is because that's how we evolved, or at least the theory is blue. We evolved using blue light as our main way to stay awake, right?
Hmm.
So in the oceans where our great ancestors came from, um, everything is based on blue light. You know, the ocean
Mm.
filters out all the other light, and you get blue light. That's why the ocean looks blue, from the way I understand it. So we are very prone to seeing blue light to help keep us awake. And
Right.
LED lights are blue light.
Yeah.
Computer screens are a lot of blue light. That's why you get these blue. You know, a lot of research on blue blocking glasses can help with sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've used blue blocking glasses, Keone. I don't know if you have, but depending on how serious they are, they can make a huge difference.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely have a pair. When I'm on a computer at night, I definitely use them. It's very interesting. Electronic stuff can for 2 hours blocks melatonin by 23%.
Mm.
That's fascinating. Reading on an iPad blocks melatonin release by almost 50%. Talk about significant possible sleep disruption or in that rhythm.
Yeah, and again, these are things people are doing thinking they're winding down.
Right, right. Exactly. So if you're reading stuff on your iPad, I mean, it's much better to read a book. It's a better way to wind down, which by the way, I do. I mean, I read before I go to sleep, but I
Hmm.
read by light, and, so far it hasn't affected me that much, or at least what I can tell consciously. But according to the studies, it can. There's the potential that it can, but especially it's worse with LED lights, or the
Sure.
brighter you have the light. So, all right. What about alcohol? Alcohol is a sedative, right? Sedation is not sleep. It fragments your sleep. It suppresses REM sleep. It's really fascinating that alcoholics can get REM rebound. Basically, they're so deprived of REM sleep, dream sleep, that they'll get rebound to such a point that they get almost like REM-like states during their waking hours, which we know is basically being psychotic, right? You hallucinate, you get, it's part of this diagnosis of delirium tremens. It's kind of rebound when you don't have the alcohol there. But with that being said, It's not alcoholics that are a problem. One drink can do a huge problem, and it fragments your sleep. It doesn't allow you to get into the appropriate stages. To successfully initiate sleep, let's talk about temperature. Core temperature needs to decrease between 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit or 1 degree Celsius. So it's much, much easier to fall asleep in a cool room than a hot room.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your hypothalamus has thermosensitive cells that detect this core temperature drop, and it helps communicate with the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is basically talks to your pineal gland. It basically is your 24-hour rhythm clock, and it gets disrupted by not having appropriate temperature there. And talking about temperature, we know that during the day, it's more yang, it's hotter, whether you're in the winter or whether you are in the summer, right? And as nighttime comes, it gets cooler. Our modern day hunter-gatherers, that they were geared towards that. The cool temperatures in the night help them go to sleep. So it's based in evolutionary, you know,
Right.
the way we evolved. One of the ways to help with that is to, a lot of people will, they may not know the reasons they're doing this, but they'll stick their hands out from their covers or their sleep. And it basically, your hands and feet and head actually help you radiate heat and actually help you tone down the temperature. So, and you can exacerbate that or make it better, I should say, not exacerbate it, but improve that core temperature drop by splashing water on your face or taking a shower where you get hot in the shower. And basically it opens up all those capillary beds in your hands and your head so that you can radiate more heat.
Mm-hmm.
The ideal bedroom temperature is 65 degrees Fahrenheit. And I know people will be like, oh, that's freezing, but that is an ideal bedroom temperature for sleep, according to the studies. It makes me think there's actually an old naturopathic treatment called the cold sock treatment, where you actually like put socks in the freezer and then you put the socks on your feet, right? And
Yeah.
it also helps, I'll bet you that significantly helps dissipate sleep, because I hear people who do that talk about getting like incredible nights of sleep by doing that.
That's
So
interesting.
yeah, it's fascinating. So a hot bath, hot shower can help. You know, it's kind of counterintuitive because you think you're heating yourself up, but you can actually help yourself radiate heat by doing that.
Yeah.
Alarm clocks or constantly pushing the clock is a big problem, especially in our modern day. You should do your best to try to wake up without an alarm clock. I know in our modern work day, the way we have set up our society, that alarm clocks are probably necessary. But if you have to wake with an alarm clock and always have to, you're probably not getting enough sleep in the first place. You'd probably go to bed earlier. If you're constantly pressing the snooze button, you're definitely sleep deprived. And basically what the alarm clocks have done is just, you know, they just basically bastardized the sleep-wake cycle for us, you know. It's another screw-up mechanism to the whole sleep problems that we have in this country.
Right.
Anyway, so how about sleep meds? Let's go through them quick. Basically, sleep meds are, you know, either like sedative hypnotics, talking about Amnion, Lunesta. What else? I guess those are the main one. Restoril is another one. You know, you can think about them as acting like stronger versions of alcohol, right? They basically don't get you to have an appropriate deep sleep or REM sleep. And then when you come off of them, you can have rebound insomnia where, you know, after you come off of them, now you can't sleep at all. So you think you need them. So then then you feel like you're addicted to them, and they are physically addicting.
Yeah.
And the studies show they only give you slight improvement in sleep, right? And that's subjective. That's not objective. So that's something you're telling the researcher. Yeah, I feel like I sleep better. Well, objectively, we don't see any improvement
Wow.
with that. And even the newer sleep medications that are out now are really not any much better. And the fascinating thing about sleep meds is there's been numerous studies now out that show they absolutely increase your risk of mortality. We're talking about death. We're not talking about morbidity. We're talking about mortality. They increase your risk of mortality. Studies by a guy named Dr. Daniel Kripke out of University of California. That's right. Took 10,000 patients that were either on Ambien or Restoril versus 20,000 not taking sleeping pills. He controlled for all these factors: BMI, alcohol use, exercise, smoking, et cetera, et cetera. that could cause increased risk of death. He ran the study for 2.5 years. Those taking sleeping pills were 4.6 times more likely to die, okay, on average. Heavy users of sleeping pills, which he classified as 132 pills per year, were 5.3 times more likely to die. 18 pills per year, which is, not a whole lot of sleeping pills, but you were actually not much better. You were 3.6 times more likely to die from taking your sleep medications. And what was causing the deaths? And that was kind of the studies that he wanted to go through to see, well, we know there's this like strong correlation, but what's actually going on? What's causing people to die?
Right.
And what he found was people had increased risk of infection. Of course, fatal car accidents were much higher. That makes sense, right? You're not getting deep sleep or improved REM sleep. You're probably more tired, and then you're out on the road, which is a big danger.
Yeah, where you kind of have that hangover effect of them
Yeah,
too.
you kind of have the hangover. So think about the micro sleeps we talked about, right?
Right.
Like that, you're more prone to that when you're not getting enough sleep. 30 to 40% more likely to develop cancer during the 2.5 years of that study if you were taking sleep meds. Animal studies showed the same thing. These were studies that were done by pharmaceutical companies with these sleep meds. And no study to date has shown that sleeping pills actually save lives. And that's fascinating, right? Because these sleeping pills, there's a whole bunch of studies that show they actually cause death. That's crazy, right? So in the interest of health, the doctor thinks we're improving health by giving a sleeping pill, but you're actually increasing their risk of death.
Yeah, we're doing the opposite of sleep.
Yeah, we're doing, but you're not. Oh man, we're doing the exact opposite. And no study has shown that sleeping pills save lives. That's crazy to me. Why are we even giving these pills out if they're not improving your life at all? So I don't know. It seems like a big conspiracy theory. Yeah, let's make them think we're going to sleep, by whoever's doing it. But but anyway, that's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So based on those studies and other studies, no longer is the first line of defense for helping with insomnia given sleep meds or prescription meds. The first line of defense is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, and you have to be trained in that. And since 2016, the American College of Physicians are saying that should be your first line of treatment. And basically, these people are going to help you go through psycho-emotional issues. They're going to go through sleep hygiene, a lot of stuff we talked about. It does so much for you for helping with your sleep than these sleep meds can ever do. Those people that feel like they're addicted to sleep meds, yeah, you need to get off of them, people. You need to do what you can to get off of them. So, all right. So where are we? We're almost out of time. So I just want to go real quick about things that help with sleep, and then we'll get a PDF together for if you guys have listened to all 4 podcasts. Yeah, you're going to get our PDF on things that are going to help you to sleep. So just email us or text us. How are we doing that, Brian? Are they just going to get in touch with us?
So we've had a link for the salad one. If they want to email us, they can email us at thewellmanspodcast@gmail.com or shoot us a DM with your email on Instagram or Facebook. Okay.
All right. Well, real quick, let me go over some of these tips for helping people go to sleep. It's not going to take long. So anyway, tips for better sleep. Stick to a consistent schedule. Exercise, but not too late. Remember, exercise elevates your body temperature. It stimulates your sympathetic nervous system. If you're going to do intense exercise, do it early in the day. Avoid caffeine and nicotine. Both of those play a role. They don't allow you to get in good sleep. They also act as stimulants. Avoid alcohol. It's a sedative, but sedatives are not sleep meds, and sedatives do not help you get into good REM or NREM sleep. Avoid large meals. We talked about indigestion affecting that, or lots of beverages at night. Think about having to get up and pee constantly. Avoid medications that inhibit sleep. Asthma medications, steroids. Avoiding naps after 3 p.m. That's a big deal. Sometimes that can ruin your sleep cycle. Sometimes it doesn't affect people, but after 3 p.m., naps can have a significant effect on affecting your sleep that night. Relax before sleep, like dim the lights, go for a walk, do things that are not stimulating, avoid the news, that type of thing. Take a hot bath, splash cold water on your face if you need to. A dark and cool room. Get sunlight exposure during the day. That helps tell your body what's actually going on out in the world. Dim the lights when you're in your house. If you are up at night, don't sit there and lie awake in bed and perseverate on it. You're probably going to stress yourself out more, put yourself into more sympathetic mode where you can't sleep. Get up and do something. And usually after 30 minutes, your mind will focus on something else, maybe meditate or something, and your body will be like, okay, let's try again. And usually you can fall back asleep. Actually, getting up out of bed sometimes will chill you quite a bit, which will allow you to drop your core temperature once again. Treatments, which we're going to do a whole nother podcast on this at some point, where we're going to go on over-the-counter meds on sleep. But the natural treatments for this is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. That's a big one. Natural sleep aids like magnesium, melatonin can certainly help. Progesterone's one. Theanine can help. Passion flower, lemon balm, these herbal nervines, chamomile teas can help. GABA-like substances can help. GABA can help tone down the brain noise. CBD, THC can help. Phenibut, but we'll talk about all those later. But our PDF is just going to talk about ways to help with sleep without the taking a pill or substance. Yeah. So anyway, thanks for sticking with us with the sleep episodes. Anything that we should go over? I think we hit everything, Brian. I don't know what else.
That's good.
Yep, right on time, right?
Yeah.
Right on time. I think we got through it in less than an hour, almost, or right at an hour.
Yep. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. We'll talk with you next week.
Get your sleep. Take care, everybody.